Welcome back, guys, to another edition of The Right Class. Today is Monday, April 13th, and in this video, as always, I'll be going over today's agenda, directions, what assignments you're going to be completing, as well as reviewing some of those concepts that will help you with those assignments. Before we jump into today's agenda, I do want to throw a couple of quick reminders at you. Google Classroom is the very first step each and every day before you start working, checking in Google Classroom, reading those directions so that you have a complete understanding of what assignments I want you to complete, as well as helping you review some of those concepts that you're going to be using on those assignments. So I hope you guys had a great weekend, a happy Easter. I know I sure did. Enjoyed some of that family time. Now it's back to work. So for today's agenda, step number one, as always, is checking in for attendance on Google Classroom, making sure that you select one of these multiple choice questions, answers, and turning that in so that we can get that perfect attendance. Quick reminder of our challenge that Phoenix and I have set for you guys. Unfortunately, we didn't meet the challenge last time, so we raised the bar a little bit. So this time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, perfect attendance. We will video camera Phoenix and I getting pie in the face for Friday's video lesson. So help us meet that challenge. I know Phoenix is very excited about getting pie in the face. Myself, not so much, but through the help of Luke Wade and a couple of other suggestions, we went ahead and incorporated that in, but it's up to you guys to make that happen. So make sure that you're checking in Google Classroom every day, you're turning in excellent work. Once again, make sure that once you get done with that assignment, snap a picture of it, make sure that name, date, mailbox number is clearly stated at the top so that I can see who that assignment belongs to. Get those sent to me via text message or email. That way you can just be done for the day and you have all your assignments. And like I said, I do give you 2 days to get these things done, but you know my recommendation, just go ahead, sit down, get your assignments done for the day so that that stuff doesn't pile up on you as the week moves along. So stay on top of your work, get those things turned in. Hopefully you will be seeing Phoenix and I get pie-faced on Friday. Help us make that happen. Drop some comments in the post below and kind of encourage your students to, hey, stay on top of your work. Let's make this happen. We want to see Phoenix and Mr. Wright get pie-faced. So back to the agenda. Step number 2, watching the video. This is what you're doing right now. Hopefully you've already done step number 1. I put these in order so that you can go through and do them in this particular order. So, as always, our first assignment for today is going to be daily language and math. Okay, at the top you have your 5 ELA questions. It says give the plural form of the following noun. Foot and city, plural. Okay, we have singular and plural nouns. Therefore, singular means one, plural means more than one. You have correct these sentences where you're going to find any and all mistakes to correct these sentences there. Number 5 says where would the following probably take place? So you're giving me a setting in this particular answer. You're going to read the sentence and you're going to think to yourself, where would this particular event take place? And you just write it on the line. Then down at the bottom you have your 5 math questions. Number 1 and 2, you have an addition. Make sure you rewrite the problem on number 2, show all your work. Number 3, it says what are the coordinates of the point X on this graph. So this little X here is representing some coordinates on this graph here. And to kind of review that, I brought this up and it says what are the coordinates of the point X on this graph. So we have our X and Y plot, X going this way, Y going up and down, and then I have also put that underneath your answer right here. Remember, the first number in your coordinate is going to represent your X, and then the second number is going to represent your Y. Remember, for all you OU fans out there, this is an easy concept for you to remember because you always go over, then you go up. OU, over, then up. And you're simply going to tell me I go how much over on the X line, and then I go how much up on the Y line. And then you put those numbers in those blanks right there. So that'll kind of help you get started with that particular problem. Just a kind of quick review of our coordinate grids here. Number 4, rounding. 369 to the nearest 10. Remember, when we round, estimating, 5 or more, change the score. 4 or less, let it rest. So if I'm rounding to the nearest 10, I always underline my place value that I'm rounding to. I circle the one after it. Okay? 5 or more, change the score. 4 or less, let it rest. Number 5, you have your number story. Make sure you're underlining and circling on that problem there. Show your work for each individual one. If it requires a unit, make sure you put that unit down there. Okay, moving on to the next assignment, which is going to be your reading passage for today. Today's theme is poetry. The Land of Nod is the title of this poem. And we're going to go over some of the poetry structures that we've talked about before. And if you remember, we actually have in our interactive notebook the structural elements of poems and drama that you can refer back to kind of help you with this assignment. So a good resource is always your portfolio, looking at some of those skills that we've talked about and reviewing those things. So, as always, we want to make sure that we read the questions first before we read the actual poem in this case. If you notice that each one of these lines, because each line in a poem is what they call a line, and each individual group of lines is called a stanza. As I recall talking to you about these stanzas, they're kind of like the little paragraphs in a poem. They're not called paragraphs, but if you notice, they're kind of grouped together like little paragraphs, but they are called stanzas. So in this particular poem, we have how many stanzas? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 stanzas, okay? And within each stanza, there are 4 lines, all right? So, back to the questions. Number 1 talks about summarizing. It says, which statement best summarizes the Land of Nod? Well, I will attach a anchor chart that talks about summarizing, okay? And if you remember, summarizing is a shortened version of the longer read that tells the basic ideas of the reading. So when you're summarizing, you are basically retelling the story in a shortened version, focusing on that main idea and those supporting details to really narrow down the importance from that particular story, or in this case, poem. Now, also to kind of review some of the elements of poetry, okay, we have line break, we have stanzas, which we just talked about, we have rhythm and rhyme, and then we have also repetition. I will attach this anchor chart to the post as always so that you can refer back to it. It's got some different types of figurative language down here. It talks about what imagery is, and we are going to review that here in just a few minutes. So this is a good resource for you that you can refer back to on this particular assignment, or you can go to your portfolio for extra help as well. Now, back to the actual questions. So we have that summarizing question. You already know what summarizing is. We just reviewed that concept. Refer back to those anchor charts if you need extra help. We have perspective. It says, how does the narrator feel about visiting the Land of Nod? Perspective is just the author's view in this particular situation. So, how does the narrator feel? So, based on what you read in the poem, looking for some of those words and expressions that they are using to show feeling and how they are feeling throughout this particular poem will help you pick the correct answer for this one. Drawing conclusions. We've talked about drawing conclusions, and that is where you are just taking the information given you in this poem and you are trying to come up with an answer. It's not going to be clearly stated, so it's very closely related to making an inference. And in this situation, it says which lines indicate that the narrator is a child. So you're just going to go through each one of these answers here and look at lines 3 and 4, read line 3 and 4, and see if they give you any tips or clues to the idea that the narrator is a child. If not, like I said, you need to go through each one of these and find which 2 lines are the ones that give you the best clues to the fact that the narrator is a child. Next, we have a context clues question. You should be very familiar with that. We reviewed that all last week. Context clues is determine the meaning of an unknown word based on the hints and clues around that particular word in the sentence or other sentences around it. Poetry structure. This goes back to what we were just talking about, how each poem is divided up into stanzas, and within those stanzas you have lines. So it says, which of the following best describes the structure of the poem? 4 sections, 4 paragraphs, 4 scenes, or 4 stanzas. Imagery Imagery is something we've also talked a lot about this year. It goes back to visualizing what you are reading, making that mental picture of what's taking place in the story. It says, which lines provide the most detailed descriptions of what the land looks like? So once again, go through these multiple choice answers and see which one of these lines help you visualize what the land of Nod looks like. Then we have poetry patterns, okay? And within patterns, we talked about poems having rhyming patterns, all right? And I have talked to you about rhyming patterns and how whenever you are identifying rhyming patterns within a poem, typically they use the letters of the alphabet. They start with A and then they work their way down through the alphabet. You can use anything to represent a pattern in a poem. You can use shapes, you can use numbers, but most commonly is going to be used the letters of the alphabet. And in this case, that's what they used. So, back to how to actually label the rhyming pattern. When I look at my poem here, I'm going to go through the first stanza with you. It talks about, from breakfast on through all day, at home among my friends I stay. But every night I go abroad, afar into the land of Nod. In order to figure out what the rhyming pattern is, I have to figure out which words rhyme in each individual line. So when I look at the first two lines, from breakfast on through all day, at home among my friends I stay. Well, I know that day and stay rhyme. So the two lines that actually rhyme are going to be labeled the same letter. So therefore I would label these A. Okay, then I look at the next two lines, but every night I go abroad, afar into the land of Nod. Abroad and Nod rhyme. So therefore I would use the next letter of the alphabet. I can't use A again because day and stay do not rhyme with abroad and Nod. So I'm going to make those B. Okay? Now, that gets you started on labeling the rhyming pattern. You're going to go through each individual stanza and do exactly what I did. Underline the rhyming words. Label these lines that actually have the rhyming words the same letter. And see what the actual rhyming pattern ends up being. That gets you started. And then we have vocabulary. It says what is the meaning of the suffix in strangest. So, suffix is the addition to a root or base word that goes on the end of a word. Okay, suffix after the word, right? So in this case, we are talking about the suffix est. This kind of goes back to comparative and superlative adjectives. If you remember, comparative adjectives use er on the end, superlative adjectives use est. That est is comparing something to a large group. So in this case, you have the word strangest, which would represent the meaning of the suffix est by putting it on the end of strangest. Okay? And then the last question is author's tone. It says which word best describes the author's tone throughout the poem. Author's tone comes down to what kind of tone is the author using in this poem. Okay? A confident tone, a comical, which means funny, an angry tone, or a mysterious tone. Tone is simply what your parents use with you from time to time whenever they're giving you directions or asking you to do something. You can clearly hear the importance of those directions based on the tone that they are giving you, and that's what you're doing here. As you read through your poem, you're trying to think about what is the author's tone as he is talking about the things that are happening in the actual poem. So that ends this particular assignment. Make sure that you are going back and highlighting to support your answers. Use your highlighters. Of course, you're going to have to use the colors more than once because most of you only have 5 or 6 highlighters, and so that's fine. Just make sure that you're going back and highlighting in the passages to support your answer with text evidence. Now, the last thing for today is going to be this week's STEM project. And I do want to go ahead and say that I am, again, super proud of all the STEM projects that got turned into me last week. I am working on putting all of those into an iMovie so that you can see how each individual person designed their STEM project, and it gives everybody a chance to kind of share their idea and finished product with each other. So I'm working on that. I'll get that up in a couple of days and make a new post with that video attached. This week's story is The Power of Wow. It's a story we've already read in our Journeys book. If you remember, it was about a mobile library that was getting ready to close down due to funding, and the students didn't want that to happen, so what they did was come up with the idea of holding a car wash to raise money to keep the mobile library open. Well, in this particular STEM challenge, that's exactly what you are going to do, your task. The characters in the story hold a car wash to save the WOW program. Your challenge for this story is to build a car wash, minus the water, for toy cars, not a real car, toy cars. You will have 25 minutes to complete the challenge. Remember, 25 minutes is definitely something you can utilize if you want to hold yourself to a really difficult challenge, but the time limit is not a must. You are starting this today. You have all week to get this done. It is due Friday. So I will do my best to remind you each and every day about the STEM project so that it doesn't leave your mind and then you end up coming up Friday and totally forgetting about it all week and then having to rush around to complete it all in one day. That's not the goal here. The goal is to work on it a little bit throughout each day to kind of spread out the workload, and that way you can come up with the best possible finished product that you possibly can. Now, optional materials. Remember, this is just kind of a suggestion guide. Optional means that you can use them or not, okay? You are not limited to this little list here. If you have something else that around your house that you would rather use, maybe you don't have some of these materials, you are more than welcome to supplement out any of these materials for something that you would rather use. Now, use this as your guide. There's a 2-page guide that you're filling out for all your documentation. Remember, go through your guide first. This is going to help keep you on track with the steps that you should be following, just like the engineers do, taking you through that engineering process. Before you even start building, you need to come up with a plan. In that plan, you need to write down what is your main goal, what materials you're going to use, draw me a blueprint or a diagram that has, of course, pictures in it, has labels, some measurements so that you can figure out how big or small this thing is going to be. You really need to lay out your plan and be specific about what you're going to do so that you know in which direction you are headed. All engineers start with a plan, okay? Take, for instance, building a house. The contractors don't just show up and start building, just right off the top of their head. They have a blueprint, a plan that is already laid out for them. It tells them all the dimensions, where they're going to start from the very beginning and taking it all the way to the end. So this is your guide to make sure that you are staying on track. So go through it. Once you've got a plan, evaluate, describe the strengths and weaknesses of your plan. This is still, before you start building, you need to think about, okay, is there anything maybe I need to change, make better, something I'm not sure that it's going to work? Evaluate any of those processes there. The outcome, after you've built and tested, explain what you observed during the challenge, and then your reflection. Once you have your finished product, going back, reflecting, thinking about, is there anything that I would change in order to make this better if I were to do it again? Okay, once again, you have your final picture there, your final description. Make sure you're using complete sentences, capitalization, and punctuation. If you have any questions about this particular STEM project, I know you guys did a great job last week. I'm really excited and looking forward to seeing the individual STEM projects completed coming in throughout the week. Remember, don't forget about it. Go ahead and get a good start on it today. Maybe come up with your plan, draw your diagram, finish that first page to kind of help you get started. And then as you move along through the week, you can start your building process. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. So that is today's assignments. Make sure that you are putting your name, date, mailbox number at the top of any and all papers. As soon as you finish something or you finish all your assignments for the day, go ahead and snap a quick picture of those. Make sure the picture is of good quality and I can see the name, date, mailbox number at the top. It really does help me out a lot when I go to grade it. I don't have to change the file name and modify anything. So that is your assignment for today. Remember, check it in Google Classroom every day. Phoenix and I really want to video that pie in the face for you for your pure enjoyment. So stay motivated, motivate your classmates to log on, hand in excellent work. You guys are doing a great job, and we're going to have a great week. I'll talk to you soon. Until then, stay tuned.